Hey, welcome to Crossroads. Folks, we're getting a better idea of the impact of the Trump indictment, and frankly, it looks like the charges against him, the whole guilty verdict, it's kind of having the opposite effect. I know a lot of us were saying, hey, this is probably going to happen. We're now seeing the effects of it. Let me explain. Now, the smoke around all this is starting to clear up. We're getting a clearer picture of it. What was expected to be a landmark case that would turn voters against, the former president. Again, early polling was suggesting that this was going to basically give Biden a very large boost. We're not really seeing that. There are currently mixed polls. You can believe whichever ones you want. Like Reuters polls are saying it hurt Trump. Other polls are saying it benefited him. So again, take it as you will. That being said, though, Trump is getting record-breaking fundraising, about $200 million, in fact. There's a rally among Republicans, even a lot of them who did not like Trump previously, even like Mike Pence, the former vice president, who previously even was suggesting Trump should be arrested over January 6th. Even Pence has come out defending Trump on this. And there's even some criticisms among Democrats, in fact. CNN, of course, has some viral stuff going around to talk about. Now, sentencing is still set for July 11th. That's going to be just a few days before the RNC is expected to make the Trump, nomination official. They're getting pushed right now to move the date back so they can do it and not have it be interfered with, by any kind of guilty verdict or sentencing. So we'll have to see with that. Now, that said, after the guilty verdict for Donald Trump, one of the big focal points, right? Because you can always get a sense of where people fall and how they view something by what goes viral, frankly. And one of the things that went viral was actually a New York Magazine article written by CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. And it states in its headline, quote, "Prosecutors got Trump, but they contorted the law." And I think this went viral really because this is not a conservative stance, technically. This is not a conservative magazine. This is not a conservative writer, I don't think at least. But regardless of that, they came out and criticized issues with the way the case was handled. New York Magazine said this. Again, folks, this is a CNN senior legal analyst. They say the judge donated money, a tiny amount, $35, but in plain violation of a rule prohibiting New York judges from making political donations of any kind to a pro-Biden, anti-Trump political operation, including funds the judge earmarked for, quote, resisting the Republican Party and Donald Trump's radical right-wing legacy. Let me go over a few of these and I'll talk about them. They note also District Attorney Alvin Bragg ran for office in an overwhelmingly Democrat county by touting his Trump hunting prowess. He said he was going to get Trump, right, as Trump keeps saying. It notes that he bizarrely and falsely boasted on the campaign trail, quote, "It is a fact that I have sued Trump over 100 times." It also notes, most importantly, the DA's charges against Trump push the outer boundaries of the law and due process. That's not on the jury. It notes as well the charges against Trump are obscure and nearly entirely unprecedented. In fact, no state prosecutor in New York or Wyoming or anywhere has ever charged federal election laws as a direct or predicate state crime against anyone for anything ever. None, ever. Even putting aside the specifics of the election law, the Manhattan DA itself almost never brings any case in which falsification of business records is the only charge. Now, the standing alone falsification charges would have been mere misdemeanors under New York law, which posed two problems for the DA. First, nobody cares about a misdemeanor, and it would be laughable to bring the first ever charge against a former president for a trifling offense that falls within the same technical classification as shoplifting. Shoplifting a Snapple and a bag of Cheetos from a bodega. Second, it notes, the statute of limitations on a misdemeanor, 2 years, likely has long expired on Trump's conduct, which dates to 2016 and 2017. So it notes that to conflate the charges up to the lowest level felony, Class E on a scale of Class A through E, and to electroshock them back to life within the longer felony statute of limitations, that DA alleged that the falsification of business records was committed, quote, with intent to commit another crime. And that's another problem because, as they note, quote, here, according to prosecutors, the, quote, another crime is a New York State election law violation, which in turn incorporates three separate unlawful means: federal campaign crimes, tax crimes, and falsification of still more documents. And notes that inexcusably the DA refused to specify what those unlawful means actually were, and the judge declined to force them to pony up until right before the closing arguments. So much for the constitutional obligation to provide notice to the defendant of the accusations against him in advance of a trial. In other words, a constitutional violation committed in the carrying out of the case. And she notes as well, this, folks, is what indictments are for. And in these key respects, the charges against Trump aren't just unusual. They're bespoke, seemingly crafted individually for the former president and nobody else. Now, on this note, there's been some different takes on Trump, pushing to, of course, appeal this. He's saying he's going to appeal it directly to the Supreme Court. He has a real chance with that. I'll be talking about that more, though, after a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges with a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold. You can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Hey, welcome back. Now, it's possible the former president, Donald Trump, could directly appeal to the Supreme Court, again, after the guilty verdict in New York against him. We'll see if he takes that route, right? He might not do it, he might do it. He's getting pushed to do it. Even Alan Dershowitz is now saying he should just appeal directly to the Supreme Court, bypass the New York Court of Appeals, because frankly that can take a few years. So really, again, we'll see what he does, but he has officially announced that he's going to appeal. Watch.
So we're going to be appealing this scam. We're going to be appealing it on many different things. He wouldn't allow us to have witnesses. He wouldn't allow us to talk. He wouldn't allow us to do anything. The judge was a tyrant. Oh, we're going to fight. It's actually, I don't know, it's something where I'm wired in such a way that a lot of people would have gone away a long time ago.
Now, look, on the note of appeal, the normal process for that can take a long time. I mean, you're looking realistically, right? Realistically, going through New York and so on, you're looking at several years if you want to appeal a case. It could take 2 years, it could take 4 years. It's a very long process. Of course, Trump, he still has time technically, but with the elections coming up, he really needs to solve this quickly if he doesn't want it to affect the outcome of the election. And so for him, he doesn't have 3 years, 4 years for the election. It's very likely he's going to be looking to fast track it somehow. The only option he has that I can think of, and I've seen other people talking about, is that he could appeal it directly to the Supreme Court. Now, that being said, he also has some different things tying in with this. Because normally, again, you can say, if you want to appeal a case, you can talk about conflicts of interest, you can talk about issues with the jury, you can argue that the instructions to the jury were possibly unlawful or at least not fair. You can talk about the jury itself having pre-established bias. These are issues you would normally raise. Trump has all that to an extent, right? That's evidence he can show to get an appeal. I don't think he's going to be denied an appeal, personally. But I think there's something else to this case that's not being talked about, which is, well, it's being talked about a bit. There's the rapid course to appeal and there's the slow course to appeal. The rapid one people have been talking about, of course, is the Supreme Court. But there's something else tying into this, which is, even according to the CNN senior legal analyst, there were violations of the Constitution in the carrying out of these charges. And so if the court itself was in violation of the Constitution in the very carrying out of the case, they can actually use that to try to push this faster. And I think, personally, I think that's what they're going to probably try to do. Because remember, the points of concern about that are not just coming from Republicans and Trump and so on. It's New York Magazine, right? It's CNN. It's Bill Maher and other folks who pointed to issues with the case. This is not strictly a partisan viewpoint. And so if Trump's lawyers want to, present their case to have this thing fast-tracked, they can actually pull those as references and note even left-wing, analysis, which makes it less partisan. They can take that and show there were violations of the Constitution in the carrying out of this case. Trump was not properly alerted of the charges at the time, right until the very end. The predicate crime was not described. In fact, the jury did not even agree on a predicate crime. The way they elevated the charges to felonies, the way they still charged felony charges in a low-level court, even though they might not have had the jurisdiction on it. And even as some have noted, and including in some of the investigations currently, that Judge Juan Merchan seems to keep getting selected randomly for MAGA-related charges, Trump-related charges. He oversaw a couple already now. He's going to be overseeing the Steve Bannon trial, a Trump ally. And given that circumstance, people are questioning, including elected leaders who are, of course, calling for investigations into this. They're questioning how he keeps getting randomly selected. It does seem a bit odd because the chances of that happening are kind of low. It's like a lottery process. Now, that said, the Biden administration also came out with an official statement. Remember, as things were getting closer to the indictment, the Biden campaign team, they were saying, at least according to different news outlets, they were saying they were going to have a big event, they were going to campaign on this, they were going to change the whole narrative and, again, start rolling out this kind of anti-Trump agenda, piggybacking on the charges. The response from them was actually a lot more restrained. It was a very muted response. Even among Pelosi and Obama and other folks, you didn't really see them coming out really strongly, cheering or celebrating this. For the most part, the statements that have been coming out are more saying we need to respect the rule of law. They seem like they're more trying to calm people down rather than cheer. Now, that being said, the Biden administration did come out with an official statement, and they do seem to support this. The Epoch Times reported that America just witnessed this is what Biden said, right? This is the statement, Epoch Times got it. The Biden administration said, quote, America just witnessed a confused, desperate, and defeated Donald Trump ramble about his own personal grievances and lie about the American justice system, leaving anyone watching with the obvious conclusion, again, this is Biden saying it, right? That, quote, this man cannot be president of the United States. Again, briefly, that's the Biden-Harris 2024 Communications Director, Michael Tyler. So again, not technically directly from Biden, but representing the campaign. And he continues stating, unhinged by his 2020 election loss and spiraling from his criminal convictions, Trump is consumed by his own thirst for revenge and retribution. He thinks this election is about him, but it's not, they say. It's about the American people, lowering their costs, protecting their freedoms, defending their democracy. That's what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are fighting for. Remember, this is their campaign, right? This is their campaign statement. They say Donald Trump is sowing chaos, attacking the rule of law, and fighting for the only thing in the world that he gives a dang about, Donald Trump. You can expect that to be kind of the new narrative coming about from the campaign. Remember, if you're dealing with a big business or a political campaign, especially one this big, every single public statement is going to be crafted around the message of the group. And so what's the message from the Biden administration now? Well, they're saying that Donald Trump is attacking the rule of law, that he's sowing chaos, that he's out for vengeance. And that's what you can kind of see basically in a lot of the establishment framing of this case as well. And that, his big thing is about defending himself, that this is personal for him. You're going to be hearing a lot more of that. In other words, that campaign statement from the Biden administration will very likely represent the stance they have going forward. and very likely the narrative you're going to hear from them going forward as well. Again, suggesting Trump is against the rule of law and he just wants vengeance. Now look, many critics are also noting that payments for the Steele dossier were listed as legal payments despite being opposition research. And this is important too, because when Trump goes to appeal this, he can note that his political enemies, in this case, Hillary Clinton, back in the 2016 campaign, that the Clinton team did something very similar to what he's accused of doing, and no charges were brought. There was never anything major with that. It was a slap on the wrist, and the whole thing kind of got swept under the rug. Briefly on that, remember what happened, 2016. The DNC and the Clinton campaign got opposition research, which claimed that Trump was colluding with Russia to rig the American elections, and then later on that he used Russian support to win the elections. They launched full investigations into Trump. You had, remember, Robert Mueller and so on. The special counsel appointed, they tried impeaching Trump over it. They used the narrative of that to frame the 2016 elections, to frame the midterm elections in Congress, and then also to even frame the 2020 elections leading up until the very end when it turned out the whole thing was fake, right? So we found out later that, again, the Steele dossier, the PP dossier, whatever people want to call it, that it was fake. It was opposition research. Nothing was ever verified. The information was gathered from unverified Russian sources, which means it was ironically Russian disinformation, claiming Trump was using Russian disinformation. And the bigger thing with that they're now pointing to is that the Clinton team, when they, again, noted the cost of that, because it was opposition research, meaning it was a campaign thing, they wrote it off as being a legal charge when they were paying, for example, Michael Cohen and so on, right? Not Michael Cohen. When they were paying Robert Steele, I'm sorry, not Cohen. Yeah, Cohen's related to the Trump case. That was Steele, the former British spy. And so when they were doing that, Trump could argue, well, they kind of did the same thing that Trump's being accused of doing, that these Stormy Daniel payments were listed as legal charges, but again, the judge and DA, they were arguing that those were not legal charges, they were campaign charges, essentially, things designed to help him win the election. Now, look, other critics are noting the taxpayer-funded cash pool used by Congress to pay off people who make sexual harassment allegations. I don't think that's actually criminal, but it's, again, something to compare to. Remember that in Congress, they changed it. They allegedly don't have it anymore. At least that's what they say, right? But they used to have a cash pool that was used to pay off people if they make sexual harassment allegations. If, for example, a staffer in one of the congressional offices claims they were sexually harassed, I don't know if it's strictly by members of Congress, but by anybody, right? They have a way of just settling that, NDAs and so on. They pay them off, they go quiet. Unfortunately, that is something you find with any big corporation or sometimes these big figures, because sometimes the allegations are true and sometimes it's just people trying to get money. Sometimes it's just a scandal and it's easier for them to just pay them off and pretend the whole thing never happened, basically. And so the issue with Congress, aside from the fact that maybe there were legitimate cases we've never been told about, right? There are plenty of legitimate cases, frankly. Besides that, one of the big issues is that it's taxpayer-funded dollars, and so your tax dollars were going to pay those payments. Now, again, that's not to say that there was campaign money. It's not to say that. But if you compare that to the Trump case, that imagine a member of Congress was accused of sexual harassment or something else or an affair, just like Donald Trump was, right, with the whole Stormy Daniels thing. Imagine if that happened and then the member of Congress had to run a campaign, because they have to campaign all the time, frankly, to get reelected. And imagine then if that legal payment given for that allegation is then written as a legal charge rather than a campaign charge. Is that the same thing Trump was accused of? Well, yes, frankly. And so is it different for Congress when they were doing it, right? Another big question to raise. And again, is it a legal payment or is it a campaign payment, especially when politicians are, frankly, always kind of campaigning? It's issues like this that are now being raised. Comparisons, notes that this seems to be more common than just Trump, frankly, and that many others who do these things and don't get charged, right, that sometimes their cases are kind of worse, frankly. And it raises questions over, well, why are they going after Trump on this? Why is Trump the only one facing charges? Why are these other people not facing charges if this is, in fact, a crime? And, of course, that's raising questions about, frankly, the legitimacy of these charges and whether it's politically motivated. Now, others are pointing out that the damages, right, they're pointing out that this whole case and the way this was handled, because people are noting the discrepancies. People are noting the hypocrisy. They're noting that, well, this guy's being charged, but people on the other side of the aisle are not. This is damaging the perceived credibility of the entire American system of justice. It's making people question whether the American system of justice is currently just, or whether charges are being brought with, again, political motivations. Now, on that note, there are different polls you're going to see coming out suggesting the actual impact of this. Reuters, for example, they had a poll saying the verdict harmed Trump. They were claiming that Trump lost like 10% of his voters. Take it for what you will, because there were other polls from other sources saying that Trump actually hugely benefited from this, and that even moderate conservatives, never Trumpers, even middle-of-the-road voters, even some Democrats were viewing it and saying, hey, this wasn't legitimate. And so, again, polls are polls. Take them as you will. Again, there were mixed polls coming out, but based on the public reaction, based on the political reaction, based on the news reaction, frankly, I do question whether this is actually going to hurt Trump. Currently, the trajectory of this looks like the narrative is flipping to the other side. That it looks like the narrative is actually helping Trump rather than harming him currently. Now, there's a push also to have Trump pardoned in New York basically because of that. It's over concerns that the prosecution is actually helping Donald Trump. They're saying that, frankly, maybe the New York governor, Kathy Hochul, maybe she should pardon Donald Trump because they're concerned that, again, Trump is using it to fuel his campaign. One of the suggestions on this was brought forward by Representative Dean Phillips of Minnesota. He said this on X, quote, Donald Trump is a serial liar, cheater, and philanderer, a 6-time declarer of corporate bankruptcy, an instigator of insurrection, and a convicted felon who thrives on portraying himself as a victim. But he's saying Governor Kathy Hochul should pardon him for the good of the country. And he said this, again, this is a Democrat representative, he said, you think pardoning is stupid? Making him a martyr over a payment to a porn star is stupid. Election charges are entirely different. He notes this, it's energizing his base, generating record sums of campaign cash, which we'll get into, and will likely result in an electoral boost. Again, based on polling, it goes both ways, but the trajectory of public reaction, the trajectory of political reaction, and the trajectory of legal reaction and so on, all of those trajectories are benefiting Trump currently. I should note there is a very slim chance that New York Governor Kathy Hochul is going to pardon Trump. Personally, I don't think she's going to do it. Let me show you her take on the verdict during an interview with NPR. Watch.
If he's given jail time, he becomes a martyr. And if he's given
justice was served in the state of New York. If you commit a crime and there's evidence to demonstrate that you have met the standards of being arrested and brought to a trial and a jury of your peers considers all the evidence, then their verdict must hold. In other words, she's not going to overturn that. At least that's what she's saying, right? And she said that's exactly how the rule of law has always prevailed in our country. And this is no different. So I just want to make sure everyone knows our rule is no one is above the law. I'd question whether anybody's above the law because we've seen different standards on it. But she notes that it's a commonly used phrase, but this is more evidence that holds in America and in our state, New York, than anything else I can think of. No one is above the law, according to Governor Kathy Hochul. And so even though she's getting some pressure to pardon Trump, and it's weird, right? Even Kathy Hochul pardoning Trump would run into the very weird part of the case that it was like not really a case that should have been tried locally. Technically, it was like federal charges, again, being charged in a local court, suggesting that they may not have had the jurisdiction for it, and suggesting as well that it's questionable whether Kathy Hochul would have the jurisdiction to pardon him on those charges also because of that. Again, raising one of the weird issues with the case and the way they handled it. There's a question of jurisdiction. Would it have to be Kathy Hochul who pardons him? Could Biden pardon him? Like, where would the pardon come from, given the issue of how they tried the case in the court that they chose? Now, look, remember also, though, we haven't seen the sentencing yet. That's set for July 11th, and the sentencing could also have a significant impact. Some are suggesting that Trump could just get community service, for the cameras, that'd be golden for a lot of them because it'd be Trump, maybe working at a recycling center or picking up trash on the side of the freeway or something like that. The optics of that, you'd have a big media gaggle following him, right alongside the road as he does his community service. Frankly, I'd question whether Trump could turn that around because he often does. If he was picking up trash, he'd be like campaigning the whole time as he does it, probably, frankly. Others are saying that he could face a short time in jail. It could be it could work basically just as a procedure where they check Trump in, he goes in his jail cell, they shut the door, photo op time, they take their photos, they open the jail door, and he's out. There's a chance they could do that. Others are suggesting the judge, Juan Merchan, could hit Trump with everything that he possibly can. And frankly, given the way this case has been handled so far, that's actually really possible. There is a chance that the judge could seek the maximum sentence for this. There's different takes on what that could be. Again, some people are saying 120-something years. Others are saying he could face up to 20 years. In New York State, because Trump is technically a first-time offender, unless they count some of the other stuff that they're accusing him of, or devaluing Mar-a-Lago and stuff like that. There is a chance that, depending on how they even decide to weigh that Trump could face a maximum of 2 to 4 years. That's still a long time. Others are suggesting as well something else. The judge could do a deferred sentencing. In other words, Trump's guilt. They could say Trump is guilty. They could say Trump is going to prison, but he's going to prison in 2 years. And the big thing with that is it would hang over his head and hang over the campaign, and it wouldn't really go away. And then if he had to appeal the case, and it's 2 years or 4 years or however long, then that would just taint his presidency if he gets reelected. That would taint his campaign, and they could maintain that image. Again, it's not clear which path they're going to take. That'll be July 11th. That said, let me show you a pollster talking to Sky News about it, saying that a harsh sentence could actually have the opposite effect of making Trump a martyr, which Trump has been saying as well. Watch this.
If he's given jail time, he becomes a martyr. And if he's given jail time, what our focus group respondents said is they're afraid that there'll be protests, riots in the street, that there is real concern that the results of this case could bring a level of violence that we haven't seen ever in American democracy. And second, just the fact that he's been found guilty of 34 felonies is something that we're not used to. And that the public is looking at this, shrugging their shoulders and saying, how the hell did we get here?
Now, again, it's an interesting take. Trump has been saying that. Trump's been saying, arrest me, make me the next Nelson Mandela. And again, suggesting that arresting him would have the opposite effect and probably boost his campaign. You actually see similar analysis coming in from the left. Washington Examiner said this. Talk show host Bill Maher expressed his concern that following former President Donald Trump's conviction, his supporters would, quote, go nuts should Trump end up in jail. And he said, quote, I mean, I've heard some people say if his name wasn't Donald Trump, he would definitely get jail time. But sending a former American president to jail, I don't know if that's something I'm asking, Maher said. And he said, I mean, MAGA Nation will go nuts. If you don't know if that's a reason to do or not do something, but they will. He said a civil war in this country, I'm sorry to say, becomes a race war. That's the sad truth about this country. And he went on saying, and if they put Trump in jail, I mean, the first thing his supporters are going to say is, oh, that's what it is, a black district attorney. You know, all these people who are the district attorneys, this is Bill Maher saying, and I'll explain my take. He says they're black, the judge was not white, he's actually Colombian. And he said, this is what it is. I would actually disagree with Bill Maher on that, on a pretty strong stance. I think he's assuming that all Trump supporters are like white people. Frankly, that's not the case. It's mixed. I think that's the media's framing of Trump, is that he represents, white nationalism and so on. I don't think that's the case. And in fact, even if you look at polling, it's changing quite a bit. Again, I don't think the divide in this country has anything to do with race, at least not on the conservative side. The narrative on the left is more about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're obsessed with race. I haven't seen that so much on the Republican side. You do find it among the alt-right, but they're kind of a small little faction right now, and it's not really clear whether they even support Trump at this point, frankly. In fact, many of them have come out against Trump, so take it as you will, right? Again, I strongly disagree with the idea that this has anything to do with race, frankly. And I've seen very little concern about Alvin Bragg being black. Actually, the framing on Alvin Bragg is more accusations that he received money from George Soros, and suggestions that because he received Soros money, that he's one of these woke prosecutors who, again, is representing the Soros agenda with that, which is light on crime for some convicts and so on. But it seems the alternate for people who are political enemies. That being said, Alvin Bragg denies that he ever received money from Soros. Soros actually denies that he gave money to him. Even Soros is kind of distancing himself. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. There were some indirect payments tied to Soros to Alvin Bragg and his campaign. But it's a bit of a gray area. That said, though, I think Bill Maher pointing out that the Trump supporters would have a field day with this. I think they're right. I don't know if they'd riot. Frankly, I couldn't see them doing that. They tend to be more pro-law enforcement and pro-law and order. I don't think they'd do it. I know people point to January 6th. Look at the instigators on January 6th and how many there were. There were not a lot. Most people were lawfully walking between the red velvet ropes and talking and hanging out and laughing with the police. There were plenty of scenes like that, and the majority of the crowd was not representative of the people who were causing problems, and there were some. And so, frankly, I think the framing that there's going to be riots over this, I don't think it would ever happen. I can't even imagine Trump supporters burning down New York or something. I can't personally ever see it happening. I do think what you would see, though, is you probably could see large-scale protests. And you probably could also see instigators within that causing trouble. And you could also probably see, I think the main thing would be that most people would just be the quiet supporters. They would have their opinions, but they wouldn't march on the streets. That said, who knows? I do feel like there's a very delicate tinderbox with all this. And maybe Bill Maher's right on that. Maybe that tinderbox just needs a spark, and who knows what will happen from there. I do think that people tend to respect the law when they feel that there's a path of grievance. But if you take away the path of grievance, if they feel the rule of law does not serve the purpose of mediating our grievances, that's when you start having trouble. And I think we're nearing that point, frankly. We are nearing that point, but I don't think it's quite there yet. Now, meanwhile, never Trump Republicans, because there are some of those as well. There are plenty of Republicans who don't like Trump. Some of the big name ones are even condemning the handling of the Trump case. Mitt Romney, for example, even Mike Pence, in fact. I'll be talking about all this, though, exclusively on EpochTV.com. So those of you on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, click the link in the description. Come and join us on EpochTV.com for more great shows, not just my own, but also others like Facts Matter, American Thought Leaders, some great shows we have. And we don't just have shows either. We also have great movies, premium reports, special features, hard-hitting documentaries on issues that I think matter quite a bit. Like the border, for example. Remember, folks, we're seeing an unprecedented border crisis at the moment. Over 7 million illegal immigrants and heavily counting. They've crossed the border under Biden alone and entered our country. But I wanted to find out personally what was really driving this. And so I launched an investigation into it, and that resulted in a documentary. You can watch that documentary only on EpochTV.com. It's called Weapons of Mass Migration. And you can find that link in the description. Let me show you a trailer, though, before we continue the rest of the episode on Epoch TV.
An unrelenting stream of immigration. Non-stop.
According to statistics, around 7.2 million illegal immigrants entered the United States under President Joe Biden alone. They have United Nations facilities here, and the people pushing this are leading people to their deaths.
To what extent is the United Nations facilitating the border crisis?
They're throwing rocks!
They're being overridden by international powers.
We are not authorized to talk.
It is a humanitarian business now.
And they said, oh yeah, these are the debit cards. We're giving these debit cards to the immigrants.
Why all the cloak and dagger? Why are we being so stealthy about this?
And some of these people have gone on record and publicly talked about this. People close to Barack Obama.
It puts 12 million people on the path to citizenship and eventually voters.
I've been researching, of course, what's happening, but I want to know why it's happening.
We'll see chaos on a global scale until America is extinguished and the power shifts completely to the east.